everybody! Today I'm back, and today is when things start getting back to normal. As you might notice, I'm in a different place again. And yes, I have moved house again. That's the second time in 4 months, and I'm ready to never do it again in my life. So now I'm all set. I've moved in with one of my best friends from university, and this is where I'm staying for at least the next 12 months, hopefully longer, because moving house is so stressful, I don't want to have to do it. So this is me set up, which is why there are finally books all set to go, and it looks like an actual lived-in place, and I'm so excited about all of that. But that also should mean that from now on, it's going to be a bit easier for me to record and upload more regularly, and I'm so excited to get more engaged with you guys, because I know I've been a bit rubbish the past few months. For the first video in my new flat, we're going to be revisiting something that I should have done about 4 months ago. My 500 subscriber giveaway video. So, you may remember that in June, late May, early June, I hit 500 subscribers, and as a part of my giveaway, I did quite an interesting one, which involved people commenting down below with the 3 books that best defined them. I was then going to pick one of those comments, read the 3 books, and suggest 3 books that I think they would quite like, that from my experience as a bookseller, kind of matching up people's tastes, I thought I might be able to do quite an interesting thing and choose books based on people's favourites. Now, if we could ignore the fact that it's overdue, I know, it's so late. It's not even just a little bit late. It is so late. I'm so sorry. Today I'm just going to get straight into it, and I'm going to talk you through the books that the winner, Claire, picked, and also the books that I've picked for her that I think she'll really enjoy. So the first book Claire picked was Girl Meets Boy by Ali Smith. So Ali Smith is literally one of the heaviest weights in literary fiction, that she just, everything she writes seems to knock it out of the park, and I've never read any, but everyone raves about them. So this was perfect for me. It's quite short. I quite like a good short kind of novella-style novel at the moment. And it's based on a retelling of a myth, essentially. And anyone that's watched my videos will know I did mythology as part of my degree. So this was a really interesting one for me. And I did really, really, really enjoy it. It covers quite a lot of quite interesting issues about gender and the role of women in society and gender identification and sexuality and just so many of these little intricate things that you would never have expected to slot it so well into an ancient myth, but that Ali has so cleverly thread throughout it. I blitzed through this really quickly. And I did really, really enjoy it. There's some beautiful, beautiful lines in there. I know about halfway through there's a paragraph about a compass and the way that kind of the girl's parents have influenced her and how they've both given her a compass and they're both a bit broken and they're both a bit off-centre. And it's just so interesting. It's such a beautiful language that's used. And it's a really, just really well put together, interesting, compact novella that I think if you enjoy mythology or you enjoy a good read and want something not too detailed and not too deep, this is a really good thing to read. I gave this an 8 out of 10. Very good, would recommend it, but not my absolute favourite. Second up is Ruth Ozeki, A Tale for the Time Being. So I first saw this when it was nominated for the Booker Prize a few years ago now, I think 2014, and it's always caught my eye because I find Japanese and Far Eastern culture really interesting. So any book kind of set in those cultures I really enjoy kind of delving into. And this does just that. It's got 2 narrative threads to it. One is it follows a girl in Japan with a suicidal father and quite a difficult life. She's quite intensely bullied, and she writes what she describes as a suicide diary, which is basically her chronicling her life and the life of her family and how she's got to the point she's at now. The other strand is of a woman off the coast of America, and like a tiny little island off the coast of America, and she one day finds in a zip-sealed bag on the beach the diary from the other narrative strand, and she's reading through it, and her and her husband kind of make this pact to read it chapter by chapter each night, and it's just about how it integrates with their lives and affects them. And it's such a clever interweaving of plot. It really captures a lot of really interesting parts of Japanese culture and spiritualism that I didn't think it would cover from the general topic, but it was absolutely fascinating to see that. The one thing that I didn't particularly like is it's kind of integral to the novel, and they couldn't have done it any other way. But the 2 narratives are split, but the second narrative of the American woman is very much reliant on the first her entire story revolves around her reading the other strand, and it just means that I didn't care about her story. Whenever the chapters set in Japan finished and it picked back up with the woman reading the diary, I just wanted to get those chapters over and done with and get back into the really interesting, deep, very philosophical, slightly mystical story set in Japan. And that was kind of a bit off balance for me, but I could appreciate that that's the only way it could have been done with the form it's got. It's very much like, actually, I enjoyed a lot of the kind of mind-blurring, kind of blurring reality and fantasy elements and things about whether spirits and ghosts exist. So just little, tiny little bits, almost very Murakami-esque, and then it kind of slips these things in, a bit magical realism, and just a really interesting way of doing it. And I have to say, I absolutely loved this. It is very long. As far as I'd go for literary fiction, I prefer shorter literary fiction, but this is long, but I absolutely loved it. I gave this an 8.5 out of 10, and I think if you're at all interested in Japanese culture or good literary fiction, this is one you should read. The last one that Claire recommended then is the one that I was the most excited about. Donna Tartt's The Secret History. So this is a book that I have heard so much about. I don't know one person who read it and didn't like it. Everyone just seemed to absolutely love it, and it's one that I know I've wanted to get around to, and this was a great reason to do it. It's about a guy who moves to a college on the east coast of America, and he spent quite a lot of time before studying Greek, and he's gone to this university with a scholarship. It's quite difficult to get there, and he gets there and tries to study Greek, but the group is really closed off. The tutor is really quirky and eccentric and only accepts certain people into his class. He has really small class sizes and needs to be the tutor for every subject. Just really interesting, unusual group dynamic, and by chance would have it, he gets caught up in this group about 50 pages in, and it's just the story of this group. The very first chapter is one of the group dying, essentially being killed by the others in the group, and it's very much a reverse mystery novel, where it's a why done it, not a who done it. From the very first outset, you know who dies, who killed them, you don't know why or how they've got there, and then it takes you back to the very beginning of the story and feeds you through it. And I have never got so invested in a group of characters in my life, because it is literally about this really tight-knit group of 6 people and their tutor. You get to see so many elements of them all. They're all such fleshed out characters. They've all got their own personalities and quirks. They all feel like such real people with actual flaws, and it's just such a group that you feel quite caught up in it. You almost feel like they're your friends, which makes everything that happens very interesting. You do see the characters all go on really big journeys, and your opinions about the characters will also go on quite a big journey. I felt very differently on page 100 than I did on page 300 than I did on page 500, and it's just one of those novels that you never know where it's going to go. The one downside for me was the main character. He was very much a witness than someone being involved, if that makes sense. He didn't seem to have much of a personality or drive or really do anything. He just happened to be there and was along for the ride, and he'd just be around these people involved in these situations. And on the one hand, that's great because it means you can put yourself into the character, but there's just enough about him and his life and his opinions that you kind of can't fully put yourself in the character, but he also doesn't feel fully formed at the same time, especially when the rest of the cast is so incredible. So that's the one downside for me, but this is one of my favourite books I've ever read. Easily, probably my favourite fiction book I've ever read. I'm giving this 9.5 out of 10 because, other than the main character being a little bit wishy-washy, it's such an incredible story, such an incredible journey, and anyone that hasn't read this, from someone who was a bit of a doubter, you need to read it. So Claire's choices were incredible. 3 really, really top quality books. I really enjoyed reading them all, and it meant that it's been quite difficult to choose books that I would recommend for Claire that I think she probably hasn't read. They're a bit different, and after a lot of brain scratching and chatting to a few of my friends, I've managed to put together a list of 3 books which I think Claire will absolutely love. So I'm going to email her later on and just double check that she's not already read any of these, and then send them out to her for her to read, as finally me finishing the giveaway. But it's been such an interesting journey to do, and I'd love to do more of this in the future. But for now, let me show you the books that I've picked for Claire. Now, interestingly, all 3 of these books I read as part of the Guardian First Book Award shortlist last year when I was doing it for Waterstones. So they're things that I probably wouldn't have picked up myself had it not been for this, but I think that's what makes this so interesting. So the first book is Grief is a Thing with Feathers, and I've picked this for a few reasons. it's about a guy and his 2 kids after their mother dies. And it's how they deal with it, how they get over it, and the way they kind of rebuild their lives. And the really interesting thing about this, which I think makes it quite applicable in this case for many a reason, is it is quite a short one, but it's kind of almost got this mythical element to it, because it's heavily reliant on Ted Hughes' The Crow poem. And basically, the crow from that poem is a character in this and is such a focal part of the book. It's absolutely fascinating the way that it kind of integrates it through. And this has got a lot of ties to Ali Smith Girl Meets Boy, in that it has got that mythical retelling woven through, but that you don't need to have a stupidly detailed knowledge of the mythology behind it. And it's a really powerful, heart-wrenching story. And it's really philosophical, and it has got a lot of links to the Ali Smith. It's very similar along the similar lines, but it's just really unusual, and it's unlike anything I've ever read. It's kind of half fiction, half reality. It's just a really unusual book, but I think if you enjoyed the Ali Smith, I think Claire's going to love this, and it is such a beautiful cover as well. I don't think you can go wrong. The next one is mostly inspired by Tale for the Time Being, the Ruth Ozeki, and that it's kind of about really getting immersed in a culture and the way that people react to this culture and see it from different perspectives. So it's called The Shore by Sarah Taylor. So this is almost short stories, but not quite. It's a set of stories based on one group of islands, like on the coast of America. And it basically fluctuates between hundreds of years ago and hundreds of years into the future, about how the shore, the area, and the islands have changed, and the people on them, and just threading together all these really interesting stories, much in the way that Tale for the Time Being does, by kind of jumping around between these different time periods and sections of history and kind of threading them together. And it's a really, really interesting book in the way it does it. Each chapter could feel like a completely different genre, and it's just one that I think if you quite like that getting caught up in a culture, and you quite like to put yourself in a situation in an area you don't really know that much about, but at the same time that's got a really interesting story that is quite quirky and unusual, and that you just get quite caught up in, this is definitely one to read. Again, it's another beautiful cover, and I think it's a really good suggestion. I think Claire's going to really enjoy this based on what she's read. Now, you might have noticed that up to this point it's kind of one book similar to Ali Smith and one book similar to Ruth Ozeki. This next one isn't particularly similar to Donna Tartt. It's kind of a good combination of all of the previous books, and that's The Wall Creeper by Nell Zink. So this is one that I've heard very, very mixed things about. I quite liked it, didn't love it. Some of my friends loved it, some of my friends hated it. It's quite an interesting, polarising book, and essentially it's about a woman, the main character, who her husband is driving along a road, swerves to miss a bird, has a crash, and causes her to miscarry. And it's about how their lives evolve from there, how they kind of rebuild their relationship, bits where they fall apart, what she goes on to do next. And it's got really interesting philosophical elements to it. It covers quite a lot of interesting, unusual subject matter, things about motherhood, things about, interestingly, you'd never think, ecology and conservatism, and it's just a really unusual book that follows a really unusual plot that you never quite know where it's going to go, in a slightly ethereal way, but still in a very interesting and very groundbreaking way, I would say. I'm really intrigued to see what Claire thinks about this, because it's one that I have had very mixed opinions on. I know people have had very mixed opinions on it as well, but I think it's one that's definitely worth a read based on the stuff that I've read of Claire's. I think this is one that she'll quite enjoy. So there we have it. Finally, after months and months of waiting, I've read the books, and they are my suggestions for Claire. So I'm going to email her, get them sent out to her ASAP, and I'm really intrigued to know what you guys think. Have you read any of the books Claire recommended? Have you read any of the books I've recommended? Do you think I've done a good job? Is there anything else that you think Claire should read based on her recommendations? I loved Claire's recommendations, so anything that you think is similar, I'm also probably going to love, so that would be hugely appreciated. Other than that, I'm going to leave a link down below to my Twitter and my Goodreads, and obviously a like and a subscribe and a comment are hugely appreciated. If you have enjoyed it, it does mean the world to me. We're over 700 subscribers now, which is a terrifying prospect, so exciting, and I can't wait to do a ton more now life has settled down a little bit more. And other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with my next video.